month's edition of Updates with Alex. I have a couple of topics and areas I wanted to go through as usual, and then I figured I'd open it up again for a Q&A. So anyone that wants to come on stage and ask a question, I'll try my best to answer them based on the info I have available. And any questions that I'm not able to answer, I always write them down and take them back to the wider team. And I think in terms of process, we're still trying to figure out the best way to disseminate those answers from these. So keep an eye out. Maybe we'll do something that's like a collection of them on chain or in the Discord, just so that people can actually catch up that weren't able to make it today. So going back to the areas of where we're going to go through, there's four in particular that I had on my list for today. The first is I wanted to give an update on team and talent, the new hires that we're bringing in and are in the process of interviewing. The second is I just wanted to give an overview of some of the ecosystem updates that are on the way, just so people have, a holistic idea of some of the things that are coming on the application layer. The third is I wanted to give an update around marketing. We've made some really big investments there that should be rolling out very soon that, I want people to be aware of, because I think that's one of the, the biggest questions we always hear is, when are we going to invest more in marketing? How can we actually go and build this community in a larger audience for DeSo and general awareness? And the last one is around DAO. So I think, last time, obviously, we had this talk. I wasn't able to fully say, the details yet, because at that point we were still working on our go-to-market messaging. Obviously, at this point, it's clear that this is something that's being incubated by the DeSo Foundation. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more in depth around, why we chose DAOs and to launch DAO from the core team, and give you an idea of some of the things that are to come. So starting up at the team and talent, the good news is that we're aggressively hiring and building out the team. Our philosophy has always been, when we bring people in, we want to keep a really, really, really high talent bar. And we always make sure that, everyone that comes in is very well positioned to actually have a large scope and continue to grow. However, as the ecosystem has expanded, it's been very clear that we need more functional specific people. So there's a few hires that we've made already. So Sophonius is joining the core team as an engineer. He comes from Facebook and has a lot of experience basically working on these social media apps at scale, has seen both, the good parts of it, as well as knowing some of the issues and ways that we can actually solve for them at DeSo. We also brought in two people that are doing growth marketing for us. So one for DeSo and one for DAO. We haven't announced them yet, but they're working with us very closely behind the scenes. And it's really been great to have someone who's in here and is dedicated to basically the holistic go-to-market approach. I think up until this point, historically, this was something that was, sort of split between myself and others on the team. So the fact that we now have a dedicated person overseeing holistic marketing on DeSo, we're already starting to see basically a huge impact from him doing that. And I'm really excited as those things start to roll out. And then the last one is that, as I mentioned in the last town hall, we are hiring for two roles. So a business development lead. This person would basically be responsible for going out and finding the best builders and founders in the Web3 space and convincing them to come build on the DeSo protocol, as well as looking into strategic partnerships that we could have. So we've already put out an offer letter for this. For anyone who's actually had experience with hiring, this is obviously an iterative process. Sometimes you have to put out multiple offers, but I am excited that we have our first offer out. Similarly, for the director of Octane role, this person would be, responsible for, number one, helping the teams that we've already given Octane funding to, and making sure that they are properly set up for success and have the support and mentorship network that they need to succeed, but then also overseeing the capital allocation for the rest of the Octane fund. And we do have an offer out for that as well. So hoping to close both of those candidates in the next week or two. If for whatever reason we can't actually close one or both of them, we do have a lot of other great candidates in the funnel. So I expect both of these roles to be closed in very early Q2 at the latest. So really excited to see us doubling down and starting to expand the team. I could say from working internally, I'm excited to bring in all this talent. This is like part of the fun of like a startup, is that you tend to get spread thin at times, but the moment we can get these people in and onboarded, I think it's going to be a huge impact on basically the team's bandwidth and our ability to just get more done. The second area I wanted to talk about was just about ecosystem and remind everyone that I know we tend to focus probably on one or two nodes most of the time. So, the majority of the traffic is still coming through BitClout and Diamond. However, there are a lot of really great apps that are starting to come out. So, obviously we're on one now with Entra. Entra released a massive update allowing for dark mode recently. They've also been, grinding really hard on the community side. I actually had the chance to go to the Entra Web3 house at South by Southwest. Sean and Michael did a phenomenal job. I talked to, even in just the, hour and a half I was there, everyone I talked to was very deep in the Web3 space. It was definitely a very legitimate crowd. And I think they also just had a new hire who I'd met there in Hannah, that I think it's going to be great that you all have, someone overseeing community and stuff now. Super excited for what you're doing. And I think it's a great example that other teams can follow that build on DSO. Outside of that, there's, obviously a whole portfolio of team at this point that are building. In fact, you can see that now at DSOList, which is the BitHunt rebrand. So another exciting update there. Great to see us getting on the new brand. But I just wanted to call out a few of them that I think, are really exciting and are looking to basically launch in the next couple months, just to get people a heads up. So one that I want to mention is that the DSO Messenger team is working on what I think could be a super, super sticky app coming out in the near future. And effectively what they're aiming to do is to replace Discord and basically bring that experience on chain. So if you look at one of the issues today is that Discord, while it tends to serve for these, decentralized orgs and people who hold a decentralized asset, the conversations and identities of the members are all living off chain. So that actually poses some huge problems when you actually want to have a completely decentralized system and community if you are basically at the whims of a centralized entity like Discord. And what DSO Messenger is basically doing is they're using the social primitives that we have, namely, on-chain, end-to-end encrypted messaging. And they're also adding in some really cool components to this as well. So one of the things that I'm really excited for is with DAO, we're going to actually be moving a lot of the conversations off of the Discord on-chain with the DSO Messenger group. And effectively, that group will be gated by you having to hold the NFTs. So I think this is a really great opportunity for us to combine a few of these different primitives and launch net new experiences. And my belief personally is that if we can actually, solve for this Discord use case, it could be one of the most effective ways to bootstrap active users on the DSO protocol. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We've been working closely with them to make sure that experience is as smooth as possible. In terms of the other updates, I think since the last time we talked, there's been updates from a number of teams. So NFT Zone obviously had a big UI overhaul. I've been playing around with certain apps in beta, so I've had a chance to play with the Pearl beta, which looks really great. Purple Creator beta is launching soon. I've already signed up for the wait list, and I highly encourage everyone else to do that as well. And then Supernovas has a massive, massive new launch coming up. I think they were originally going to come out on the 14th, and they just wanted to push it a little bit because they want to make sure that it's as smooth as possible. But I think they are taking a phenomenal strategy, basically supporting cross-chain assets, but then using DSO for the social layer. So this is sort of a new strategy. I think that is something that we haven't really tried enough at DSO. So I'm really excited to see what they do as well. So again, just a reminder, obviously there's a lot of updates that are coming out, both from the Octane teams, and then I'd say also, from the development grant team. So I think one that's gotten a lot of attention this week for good reason has been Overcloud. So Overcloud is a development grant team, and I think they're a perfect example of why the development grant program has potential. Obviously, a lot of the projects that we invest in or just allocate capital to in the development grant program tend to be very early, but Overcloud shows that, even with a little bit of capital, that's all it takes to get some people to really get an initial version of the app out. So I've been playing around with the node. I think it has, a phenomenal feature set, and excited to see what they do next. That allows us to move on to marketing. So there are a couple of updates around marketing in specific that I wanted to give that I think are really exciting and frankly, probably a little overdue, but I'm glad that we're investing in them now because they'll be massive for growing mind share. So the first one is that we actually are investing six figures in actually putting together proper brand videos for DSO. So one of the biggest, sort of complaints I tend to get from people is that, hey, like there isn't like a good like asset for me to share with someone to help them understand DSO or this certain aspect of DSO. And up until this point, we've really indexed heavily on like written blog posts or Twitter threads or things of that nature. But the reality is that, video is sort of king in this space when it comes to brand building and to actually, making it easy to disseminate information. And so we're actually working with a professional production studio. And what we're going to be doing is actually releasing an overall brand video for DSO, plus 4 explainer videos that are going to be targeted at different audiences that want to come to DSO, such as users and creators, founders, and then developers. So these are all on track. We finished up the scripts for them just in the past week, and now they're getting passed off to the animation studio. So at this point, I think we're targeting around May for these to launch. Obviously, when you're working with creative studios and things like that, there's always like a slight risk of some of it pushing out, but looking forward to having the brand videos and those explainer videos done basically in Q2 so that we can continue to build that DSO brand, and everyone will have, this really compelling asset that they can pass around to anyone that wants to learn about DSO. On top of that, we're still continuing to invest in our paid ad spend. So we're investing in Google ads continuously. We've been working on actually iterating the process. One thing that we've realized is that, you really need to have a solid end-to-end funnel. And that's something that our new growth marketer is actually focused on. Is we're seeing a really low cost per click on the Google ads, but there's certain dead ends that we basically have in our website. So our growth marketer is actually working on reimagining those user flows and making sure that we have high conversion on every step of the process. And now that we have new assets such as, the developer hub that Ty just built, we think there's going to be a lot higher likelihood that someone who, gets exposed from DSO for the first time and actually lands on our website could actually be directed through processes and actually take key action items that make them much more likely to convert as either a developer or a founder on DSO or an active end user. Then the last area I wanted to talk about was basically DAO. So obviously, I think this is, getting a lot of attention for good reason in the ecosystem. It's something that we're personally really excited on, and I think it's going to help a lot of different audiences in our ecosystem. So I wanted to take a few minutes to basically explain a little bit more about the why of why we're into DAOs and why we believe in DAO so much. So to kind of just take a step back, the first question that, we sort of asked ourselves was like, why DAOs, right? Like we've been hearing about them a lot. It's this new, it's a primitive that's been around for a while, but it hasn't quite had its moment in the ways that like say tokens or NFTs have. So the question for us was like, why should we care about DAOs and why do they actually have potential? And for us, one of the things that we realized in the first cohort of the Octane Fund was that starting a Web3 organization and maintaining a community is actually really, really difficult, particularly for people that are in different countries, right? So we had teams where we'd actually finalized the amount of capital we wanted to allocate. They were ready to get going, and they were caught up and delayed by weeks, if not months at time, just trying to set up the right entity and trying to get their employees onboarded and, finding a way to actually receive capital from us. And I think what that made very clear to us was that if we are truly going to offer a global and digital protocol and community, that we need to actually have these systems set up that allow us to do that in a timely and smooth manner. And if you look at what DAOs can do, they're really well positioned to actually solve for the new digital global economy. People can easily come and go from organizations, right? Like today, if I want to join a company, it's just really slow and arduous process to actually onboard. And then when I want to offboard, it can take weeks of notice. I have to, pass up all this information. Where with DAOs, it's much more fluid. People can come and go to DAOs on any timeline they want. They can be in multiple DAOs simultaneously. So it really makes it better for workers at these companies or participants in it. And then, obviously, if I'm trying to actually found a company, it's really difficult if I want to have a global and distributed community around it And what DAOs really do is they actually eliminate barriers to entry. This was one of the original promises of cryptocurrencies, is that, you know, you have this permissionless and borderless system that actually removes a lot of the friction that's in place in the traditional financial system. So for us, when we looked at DAOs, it just made complete sense with what our mission is. And, you know, some of the biggest sort of friction points our Octane Fund founders were having, we saw could be completed with DAOs. So once we basically decided that, hey, you know, DAOs are this very, very mission critical thing, the next question was, okay, so how do we get it done? And I think for us, what we realized was that because this is so mission critical, we needed to make sure that we were closely working on this, because this has to be built in a secure and scalable way. And it also has to be done extremely fast. You know, I think it's important that people recognize that, you know, what we're going to have launched by May, I can tell you from personal experience, that would have took 3 or 4 years to launch at LinkedIn. And that's not an exaggeration. The raw amount of features and complexity of what's getting launched it cannot be understated. And what we realized was that the only way that we could actually unblock a lot of these teams and actually start to build this community was that if we leaned heavily into this ourselves. So that was ultimately why we chose to build DAO from the DeSo Foundation team. That being said, I want to make it very clear that we will continue to iterate and integrate other features and teams. In fact, we hope that there are a lot of competitive or alternative features for each one of these, right? We want to have multiple on-chain order books. We want to have multiple on-chain messaging systems. We want to have multiple on-chain governance solutions, because that is how you basically win in Web3, is that you give people options and you don't keep them stuck with one thing. So that's a point I really want to emphasize, is that while we felt it was important to get an initial solution out there, we're going to continue to look at the ecosystem. And as we see other features or apps launch, we're going to find a way to integrate them with DAO to actually lift them up as well. So we're super excited to see the innovation that hopefully this kicks off. And if you think about it, this is very similar to sort of the BitClout process we saw, which was that BitClout launched and showed people what you could do with these primitives. And then all of a sudden we saw, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of apps that popped up immediately after that, after looking at what was possible with BitClout. In terms of the current state of where things are actually at with DAO, we have a lot of, I think, really good momentum. It's very clear that this message is resonating a lot with DAO founders and community members. One of the biggest complaints we always hear from them is like, you know, I have to go use all of these different tools on Ethereum if I want to run a DAO. It's a super messy process. There's high gas fees. The communication's not happening on chain. So we really think this is going to solve a good value prop. And that's basically been reflected in the early energy we have around the Discord. We've also bootstrapped around $1.3 million for DAO already that'll sit in the treasury and can be actually voted on by the DAO holders with how they actually want to leverage that moving forward. And I think the last piece of all of this that is really exciting is that we really are just getting started. So one of the things we realized is that there was a lot of like early hype around DAO and we got a lot of people in. And then what we realized was that if we truly want to, you know, scale up this community, right, and bring in fresh faces to the DeSo ecosystem through DAO, we really had to have a regimented approach for how we were going to go to market. And so we actually spent the past week working directly with our new growth marketers to actually figure out our holistic go-to-market plan. And that's something that we're actually going to go all out on starting really this week, where we're looking at this two-sided marketplace, which I think Ed, I saw in the crowd, could probably talk to. How are we going to actually bootstrap demand for people that want to participate in DAOs, as well as supply to have some of the best DAOs in Web3 launching on DAO and building on it. And one thing I'm excited to announce is that last night we sent out an email to all the Octane Fund founders for the opportunity to be in the first cohort of DAOs to launch on DAO. So we're actually going to work very closely with the first DAOs that launch on DAO, making sure that they're set up for success. And we hope to see at least a few Octane teams that actually convert to DAOs. So on that note, those were the 4 main areas I wanted to touch upon. I know that was probably a lot of information, but if anyone has any other questions, I'd love to open it up now. And Ed, I don't know if you're available right now, but if you want to hop up on stage as well, for any like product questions related to DAO or anything like that. Love to have you up here as well.
Hey there, thank you. So I'm thinking after listening to you talk about DAOs in general, DAO in specific, and what really caught my attention is I don't think I understood the definition of what they were. I kind of thought of them as an investment model. You paid money in, you had to have money to make money sort of thing. But then I had caught you say something about onboarding for companies and offboarding and how that's expensive and kind of the decentralized economy. And it sounded like there was like employment advantages there. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit and help me understand a little bit more what that looks like? Because that's really exciting to me. It seems like there's a lot more opportunity for people outside of just tech to, have gainful employment, and that's a passion of mine.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. So, I think the first thing to do is like actually break out the idea of like DAO into its like component parts. So the idea is, decentralized, right? Meaning it's completely distributed. It can be participated by anyone. There isn't one single person that necessarily is controlling it. Autonomous is really refers to basically leveraging like code to actually execute on the decisions being made. And then the last part is organization. So, how do you actually get a group of humans, right, to come together and work towards a common mission? And so when you look at those, basically that definition, what that means is that there's a couple of different types of organizations that can be built around it. So we kind of like talk about it and like tend to talk about it in two main parts. So one is this idea of like capital intensive DAO. So this is where I think, if you look at like Constitution DAO, right, this was a situation where you had a mission and the mission required like basically financial capital to have it done, right? And that it definitely is a type of DAO. But then there's also this idea of like more like labor intensive DAOs, right? Where you basically have a group of people. A good example is my friends run a DAO called Vector DAO, which is for, designers that want to continue to build on Web3. And that's much more labor intensive in the sense that it's basically a new way for people to find employment, right? Maybe not in the traditional sense, but basically find their profession and be able to do work. So the short answer is yes, like DAOs have the ability to solve for both of these because of the fact that they are digital first. And I think a lot of people don't realize like a lot of the big issues we have today in our global economy is that we still have these like archaic sort of systems that aren't set up, right, for digital things. And the question is like, well, why hasn't it been done? And part of it is just inertia. And so, yeah, I definitely think that's something that can happen in the future is that, from whether it's like a traditional work structure or just being a member of any organization, right? Whether, there's this concept of like nonprofit organizations or communities or things like that, the ability to come and go despite living anywhere in the world is something that really hasn't been seen before. I also know, Ed, you've been thinking a lot about this. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on to that in terms of like how you view DAOs and stuff like that, but it would be great to hear from you too if you have some thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think you summarized that really well. The way, I think the kind of tagline that we've been using around, a subreddit with a mission and a bank account, and you can, it's abstracted for the right reasons, and because it can be basically any organization. And to Alex's point, I think the autonomous part is really critical around, DAOs being able to sort of be, very programmatically driven. I think, where we've seen the past, if you look at like the Industrial Revolution, a lot of that was formed, based on the idea that, we need to stick a bunch of people together in these really, really tall buildings on side of a coast, right? Like LA, SF, Seattle, New York, Miami. And what we saw with that was, it caused this kind of organizational structure, right? You have to sort of kind of climb up this ladder, you have to sort of go through this hierarchy, and you can only sort of, work, for one thing at a time. And over time, depending on what stage you're in, you might start to sort of lose your actual passion. You might join a company and say, oh, I studied for this. It's exactly what I wanted to do. But then you find yourself trying to climb up this ladder and, now, you've kind of almost sort of lost your purpose. And I've definitely sort of seen that happen in my own life and in my own network as well. what we've seen kind of evolve out of that with the technology space is, I think probably one of the key movements was the gig economy. And I think Darian, who's in the audience, we were talking about this, on chain. And the gig economy, what that allows you to do is it allows you to sort of, almost choose how you want to work. And what you wanted to work on. So you can be an Uber driver, you can be an Airbnb host, you can, be a DoorDash, delivery person. And you can choose, your own hours and your own sort of flexible kind of lifestyle. The sort of next kind of wave that sort of emerged out of that is like the creator economy. And what that showed the world is that, you can do, monetize your passion. You can do what you love for a living. And, if you love to paint, now you can actually just paint. And you can fund yourself, with, through like YouTube or Instagram. Unfortunately, the funding models there are very, very small in terms of like the percentage that you get out of that. What I sort of think with DAOs will be more common is a merging of the kind of gig economy and the creator economy. And what that will allow people to do from, Carrie, your specific question around this idea of employment and flexibility is it'll allow folks to sort of, choose how they want to work, where they want to work, and not be tied to a specific entity. So one of the things that we're seeing with DAOs is that people belong to multiple DAOs, right? When I work for a company, I belong to a single company. I think with DAOs, the whole idea there is that because things can be super programmatic, super decentralized, and super autonomous, it creates so much more flexibility for you to sort of almost pick and choose how you want to work, and what you want to work on based on the skills that you develop, based on what your passion is. So for me, if I'm a designer, I can go sort of do some design work for like Vector DAO or another DAO that might need some kind of design work. And then if I'm like too bogged down, I just take a break for like a week. Because that's how, I think humans kind of operate the best is when you kind of, you sprint and then rest. Does that give you any clarity?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
actually. It lended me a follow-up question. You spoke to creator economy, you spoke to gig economy. I come from a very heavy service-based economy. I come from food service, and we all need food as humans, no matter how meta we'd like to get. Still got to feed our bodies. But that being said, where do DAOs fit in from sort of the customer or user service experience, and where does that fit into like an employment sector?
It's a really good question. I think, if we kind of take a little bit of a step back, DAOs are, I would say the space for DAOs right now are like what NFTs were in like 2018. Which was basically a heavily experimentation phase. It didn't sort of, have its aha moment until like late 2020 when Dapper Labs launched like NBA Top Shot. So that's just kind of the phase that DAOs are in, which is like there's a lot to be figured out. There's a lot to be experimented with, especially on the labor intensive side of DAOs, which is basically how do we actually keep organizations like structured and run. On the sort of capital intensive DAOs, I think there are more kind of, similar parallel models to follow, which are just more like kind of fundraising and decentralized fundraising and new investment models for that. In terms of like service-based industry, I think, that is something that requires a lot of sort of coordination, and planning amongst teams to make sure that, everyone is tasked appropriately and goals are being hit. But I don't necessarily have, and maybe Alex, I'll throw this onto you, but, I don't have a specific answer because I think we're just, this is still being very experimented. So a good example is like Vector DAO, which is a friend of Alex's actually. And what they try to aim to do is run a full design agency that's fully, decentralized and autonomous. But much to Alex's earlier point, like much of that happens, in like a Notion docs and Discord in terms of like the planning and communication coordination. So we haven't really seen that yet, fully sort of all of that kind of happen in a single tool where the community and social side, as well as the planning side, the governance side, and the fundraising and investment side all wrapped into one. And I think that is something that would be fascinating and awesome to see for a platform like DAO kind of evolve into in the future.
Yeah, so what I'm kind of hearing you say is it's a little bit too early for that sort of physical IRL service space, but you have to kind of develop these digital spaces first to kind of work out the bugs. But that is somewhere on the radar. I know a lot of people who are what I like to call tech terrified, and they only hear like the mainstream things. And coming from myself, like only 3 years ago, being, like I said, in restaurants, I just want to be able to see some of these entry level opportunities for people who aren't necessarily designers, who aren't necessarily in the tech space, but like, let's the societal benefits to these decentralized organizations and the trickle down sort of, even if it is a way off. I understand why it would be a ways off, but just so that everybody's kind of still focused on that overall general well-being.
Love that. That was a great discussion. Should we let the Crescenstein Bros give a question? If you guys want to hop in.
Yeah. Hey guys, how's it going? So there's been a lot of talk about DAO swap and how that's going to work. I'm just curious how the mechanism works. Like, say you buy a DAO token and you want to pay, let's say with USDT or with Bitcoin. Is DeSo exchanged at all, or can you explain to me how that operation takes place?
Ed, do you want to dive into the on-chain order book model idea, or do you want us to save it? Because I know Natter's going to do a video on it soon, and I don't want to butcher any part of it.
Yeah, there's Natter will do a video on this. It's a really good question. There's a lot of technical complexities involved in this in terms of like how we actually want to do it. So, and they're being discussed right now. So I don't want to give the wrong answer, or like, just like not framed correctly, but, these are definitely things that we're definitely, talking about actively right now. I think the engineering team has a long meeting to discuss this tomorrow as well, in terms of like all the structures and like what we can actually deliver at launch. But I'll definitely sort of, leave it for them, and then have Natter kind of sort of do a much more formal kind of video and comms on it.
Okay. Then also, I know Natter said he was going to release something about legalities and like his position on like the legal issues. I assume you got some lawyers to chime in on that. Is that coming anytime soon? Yep.
No, we totally hear you on that. And I think even for me, like, I want to make sure that anything that we do is, all of our bases are covered. And that can't even be, understated for Natter. Natter has a lot of experience on the regulatory side, especially from his days at Basis. So he triple checks every single detail. He's heavily focused on it. We have a pretty good team on it. It's just one of those things that we'd rather sort of make sure, like, again, like, both with technical complexities and also legal complexities, we want to make sure that, all of our sort of, our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, right? So we want to make sure that everything is triple checked in detail. But definitely, communications and all that stuff will happen. Absolutely.
And my final question is, who's going to the DeSo anniversary?
Good question. I probably won't make it. Unfortunately, I'll chime in virtually though. But Alex and Dylan, I believe so. You guys probably. I think Alex is in LA right now, actually.
Yep, I should be there. So just got in last night. Actually, I was before this in Vegas for After Party, which is their community. There's a lot of overlap between After Party and DeSo community, and so came straight from there to here so that I can see some of you and meet with some of you this week. So I'm really looking forward to it. I know, there's some of you I haven't even had a chance to meet in person yet. So I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, should be a fun time.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Does Flanagan want to ask a question?
I just have a question around DAO and what sort of mechanisms you guys think you'll be able to have in place at launch to allow for trust and trustlessness. I know you have multi-sig wallets. I believe that should be on chain and visible to everyone. What other mechanisms are you going to have in place or planning for to avoid rug pulls and other issues and allow for trust so that crypto users, but also just normal everyday people that may want to join a DAO can, have the confidence that their money will be in at least not stolen, if nothing else?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's critical, right, to ensuring trust is that these things are like baked in from day one, because I think we've seen this with basically like, unfortunately, every primitive, I think, in crypto so far in the early days. Like there's a lot of like scams and rug pulls and stuff. And I think it actually slows down the industry a lot. So we're trying to be very deliberate with how we launch it. There's a few specific things that I think that are just naturally baked into the DeSo protocol that should help. So the first is that, because DAO will use DeSo for the social layer, you're going to naturally have every user having a social identity tagged to everything that they're doing. And I think this is really powerful because now we can start to use more signals than what you would have in an existing process. So I know people talk a lot about like ENS, and I think that is a great way to like start to look at reputation. But if you actually look at what DeSo has available, there's way more strong signals, right? You can look at how active someone has been on chain, who follows them, who do they follow, are they verified or are they not verified, things of that nature. So I think actually being able to leverage all those signals that you get out of the box with DeSo identity will be something that, number one, will help build trust in who are the actual identities and the people behind the DAOs themselves, as well as the participants in the community. So that's sort of on like the social reputation side. In terms of the actual fund size, as you spoke to, we're going to have on-chain multi-sig wallets, which will actually help ensure that, there's a level of trust there in the sense that, no one individual, right, can actually go and just, rug the funds. There has to be a process before any type of funds are moved, which is great. Another unique aspect we have is that, if you look at most of the most of the governance mechanisms on, say like the Ethereum blockchain, a lot of those votes aren't actually being written to the Ethereum blockchain. It'll do like basically a basic read on your wallet, but the votes aren't being written, right? So I think that's another aspect that'll be on chain as well. So from a technical perspective, I think those are the few like key features we're just going to get out of the box with DeSo that should help with it. But outside of that, there's going to be, obviously this manual piece, and this is again why the DeSo Foundation wanted to work closely with this, is that we're going to actually help manually curate, right, the first set of DAOs that launch on DAO. We want them to all be really positive. We don't want just anyone coming in here, trying to attempt a rug pull. We want people to come in that have a very serious mission, are set on building great organizations, because if the first DAOs on DAO do accomplish their mission, if they are very reputable, it actually helps our entire ecosystem as well as DAO. So we will personally be working to ensure that the first set of DAOs we have are meeting that quality threshold as well.
Great, thank you. I do have maybe one other quick question, if it's not going to take too much time. How much time and resources do you guys plan on adding to, or using for DAO on an ongoing basis after launch? And would the DAO be expected to vote on potentially paying developers, or how would that work?
Yep, that's a great question. So I think at this point, the overlap's been pretty solid, because a lot of the updates that have to happen for DAO have to actually happen at the protocol layer. So like a lot of these like work around, the updating the primitives of like the messaging, or like building something like a multi-sig, that's something that we needed to have baked into the protocol no matter what. So it's a pretty strong overlap right now, right, between protocol level work and like DAO work to enable the features. But I think it's a very good point, which is moving forward, how do we, make sure that we can maintain and continue to iterate on the app? And that's something where we're, really working to actually increase the size, right, of our team. And I think Ed can talk to that a little bit more. But I think definitely moving forward, this is something where we want to make sure that DAO is set up for success, as well as the protocol. So, right now, again, it's very overlapping. So being able to do both from like a building standpoint has been pretty feasible. But I think, moving forward, as we continue to expand out on DAO and, as the user base grows and all that, we'll have like a dedicated team for that. I know, Ed, you can probably speak a little more to that as well, but it's certainly something that we plan on doing as we scale up.
Yeah, exactly. On the resources side, I think right now, given the sort of overlap, it makes sense for us to kind of spend time on both in terms of like the protocol as well as DAO, given how much of the sort of primitives that we're building will be fully utilized by DAO. Over time, DAO will be a product, and it will be a product, to your point, Flanagan, of like that's also governed by people. And that means two things. One is that there's going to have to be a sort of team dedicated to building DAO. So that's probably will be like myself, engineers, designers, product managers, things like that, to help kind of iterate, learn, and continue to sort of build the future of DAO. And on the sort of governance side, I think it's going to be a really interesting experiment. It's kind of the way I think about it, which is like we're building a platform to launch DAOs, but DAO itself will be a DAO, and it'll give us a lot of learning in terms of how to build things community first, and how to make sure that community has their voices are uplifted in a way that can actually be represented by action, based on sort of where they want DAO to sort of head towards. And I think to your point, in terms of like treasury management, things like that, I think we'll leave that stuff up to the community. My kind of personal kind of view and hope is that we can vote on things like using the treasury for funding other DAOs and bootstrapping DAOs to get them off the ground. I think that could be really interesting, like how a foundation works, but also just like fully governed by people. I think another kind of interesting use case for DAO's treasury would be, to your point, funding other developers as well, or maybe we have something else, another DAO called an Octane Fund DAO or something like that. But I just think that it's a really sort of wide array of things that we can do, and I think it's going to be a really fun, exciting journey in terms of how do we build this product, how do we put a team around it, how do we make it very community first, and make everything very open, transparent, and actionable as well. So will be really exciting times.
Thank you.
Awesome. New speaker up, do you want to ask another question?
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for the updates, and I got so many ideas listening to everyone to talk about DAOs and whatnot. So the question I had was like, it's really important for the early DAO community to be it's really important because those are the people who are going to make the initial decisions and sort of are going to propel the growth of the DAO further. So how are we thinking about those initial group of people who are going to be in the DAO and then sort of making the decisions or voting on the decisions? And then the second question I had was like, what is the process of proposals going to be for the DAO? So is it just the community members who can present proposals to the DAO, or is it like open for everyone and the DAO then makes the decision? So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So there's, very focused on governance. And so a few things about that, right? One is that, I think part of the reason we're putting so much energy on go to market for this is that we do want to get as many different voices represented in the DAO community as possible, so that, there is a diversity of opinions and stuff. And one of the things we've actually really been pushing towards is how can we bring people from other blockchains into DAO, because the reality is that the vast majority of DAOs are actually built on Ethereum, right? The vast majority of DAO founders and participants are on Ethereum, and so that's why we have a lot of great features like actually accepting multi-currency investment and treasury support. We think will help bring in more people from those communities to help be part of it. We've also, obviously at this point, what we've done is actually allow the ability to, buy an NFT, which reserves access to, DAO tokens, which will basically work towards governance. And part of the reason we did tiers for that is we want to make it as easy as possible, right, for anyone to participate. We don't want, cost to be this barrier to entry, right? And so by having all those tiers, it should be very well represented in the sense that it won't just be a few people, it'll be a lot of different people that can actually participate in the governance. So in terms of the details, this is something probably Nader and Ed would probably have to talk to, and I think we might have just lost Ed. But basically the idea would be that, in terms of how we run the governance, most likely what I've seen from most of the governance systems on other blockchains is basically anyone can so long as you hold the governance token, you can actually you can submit a proposal. And then there's different ways to actually do the voting, right? So I've seen it where it's basically just based on the objective number the token that you hold in your wallet. I can do it. Obviously with that is you want to have a way to smooth it out, so you can't have something like a 51% attack on the vote, right, where someone just gets a lot of the token and can basically influence it. So there's other ways that you can do it. You can do it based on individual wallets. You can do it in other ways. So I think in terms of those governance mechanisms, those are some of the things we still have to iron out. The good news is that there's a lot of different existing paradigms that exist on other blockchains that we can leverage for doing that. So that's, I think, another video that Nader will be putting out along with the on-chain order book exchange and things like that. As I think he's going to put one out around governance as well. So it's a good question. Sorry, I can't get more detailed there, just because I'm not quite as close on the product part there as probably Ed or Nader are.
Thanks so much, and for clarification, and I will definitely explore it on my own as well. And to me, this is just another way to do capital allocation, and sort of all quality ways of capital allocation are worth exploring. So
Yes.
it's worth it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And this is actually a really interesting set of problems. I highly, highly recommend that everyone go checks out the Bankless newsletter. So they have a whole section. It's called Bankless DAO, and they do a State of DAO series. And this is one of the things they talk about there. It's really the beginning of the time, right? This is a problem beyond the internet and Web3. It's since the beginning of time, how do you help different people basically come together to organize and make decisions? Turns out it's a really, really hard problem, right? And we've seen the full spectrum of complete authoritarianism, right, where someone just does top-down decisions, right? And then we've seen the other extreme of if you do complete democracy, right, where it's every single person votes as well, right? And one of the things they break down in one of their recent newsletters is what is the right system, right, to actually allow for fast and right decisions to be made. And it turns out that no system's perfect, to be honest with you, right? They all have their own downsides, but what's cool about DAOs is we're basically experimenting on a new iteration, and we now have new technology. So I think the first thing we have to do is all level set on this is not going to be perfect. There's been no system in the history of the world that has allowed humans to perfectly organize and make decisions. But it's cool because we now have new ways of experimenting, right? And so prior problems that we have can be fixed. There'll probably be a host of new problems that come up, and it's on us to basically determine what are the solutions to the new problems. But yeah, definitely go read the Bankless newsletter series on this if you want to truly understand about DAOs, because I think they're probably the best at describing that now than anyone else.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll just go check this out. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the questions. Cool. So I think it looks like that might have been the main questions we had on that front. So, I guess I'll just end by saying, a couple of words just about the state of the DeSo protocol and the ecosystem. So, I think for a lot of people, right, Q1 was a little bit slower, and that was because I think we just had a lot of things that are, kind of happening behind the scene. And I think this is just very indicative of, software development in general, but particularly in Web3 is that, for better or for worse, there tends to be these waves, right? And I think for us, we allocated all of this capital, right, to a bunch of Octane teams and development grant teams at the end of 2021, right? And these updates don't happen overnight. It takes, right, a few months for teams to actually build and iterate. And I think what we've seen a lot of this quarter, right, is a lot of building that's happening behind the scenes. So a lot of apps, a lot of features that are in beta being tried out in private groups. Obviously, we would have loved to see all those out already, but this is sort of the process of software. It's very iterative. And I think what excites me is that going into Q2, we're finally getting to a point where a lot of these projects are ready to start going out. And, when I look at the state of DeSo, right, what I think about how these movements happen is that they tend to happen like all at once, right? And so I think it's easy to say, oh, like, you know, active usage might be down a little bit from what we're used to now, but in my eyes, it's very binary, right? It's either like we're viral or we're not. And the key is that we continue to set ourselves up and build systems that we can continue to get these really good attempts. So I think DAO is, you know, a really good attempt, right, to bring in a lot of active users and do that. I think a lot of these Octane apps, right, that are like iterating on new use cases are really good opportunities. And I know we say it all the time, but you know, really all it takes, right, is one or two really compelling use cases to re-energize the whole system. So I'm excited for next quarter. If this was if this was the quarter of building, I think Q2 will be the quarter of shipping. And usually what follows shipping is the engagement. So I appreciate everyone here's patience. I know it hasn't been, you know, easy at times, right? We all want the same thing. We all want the engagement. But I think, you know, Q2 is when we finally start to see some of that patience get rewarded. So I'm excited, you know, to still be here with all of you, building and iterating and conversing together. And I look forward to seeing, you know, a number of you in LA this week to talk more about it in person.
If you'd like to connect and network with other like-minded people, entrepreneurs, investors, freelancers, and startups, check out our app or go to our website, joinentra.com. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. If there's anything that we can do to help you, please reach out to us and let us know.